meet our first two main characters, the genius scientist Senku Ishigami and his friend Taiju Oki, the Brawn. Taiju finally decides after 5 years to confess his love to our third main character, Yuzuriya Ogawa. As he's about to confess, a bright green light flashes and all of humanity is turned into stone. 3,700 years later, Taiju manages to break free after doing nothing but thinking of Yuzuriya in his petrified state, and finds that Senku had already broken free 6 months earlier and already set up a camp. The duo then spend the next year developing a solution to break the stone and revive humanity. Senku and Taiju finally make enough revival fluid, as they call, to free one person from the stone. Not surprisingly, Taiju decides it should be Yuzuriha, and Senku, being the great friend that he is, agrees. However, a duo get attacked by a group of lions, forcing them to instead revive the strongest dude known to them in the town, Tsukasa Shishio. Once revived, Tsukasa hits the first lion with a one-hit quitter, and Tsukasa becomes the designated hunter providing for the group. Taiju is sent to harvest seashells and grind them into calcium carbonate powder. Tsukasa reveals to Senku that he intends to murder petrified adults to create a world free of corruption. Senku doesn't agree with Tsukasa's ideals, and the two clash heads. Senku knows Tsukasa's too skrunk, and therefore he has the most authority, so he sends him away to the source of the revival fluid, while he and Taiju finally revive Yuzuriya. Tsukasa returns and the trio clash, with Senku pulling out a crossbow to shoot Tsukasa, but he just ends up catching the arrow because Tsukasa's just so OP. Tsukasa pretty much shrugs off the resistance and goes on his way, letting them know to don't stand in his way. After watching a man grab an arrow mid-flight, Senku, Taiju, and Yuzuriya decide they need to GTFO and travel towards Hakone, where they find a hot spring and Senku creates gunpowder. Taiju ignites the gunpowder Senku just created, creating an explosion in smoke. Another source of smoke is spotted in the distance, suggesting that there are other survivors as well, so Senku continues to ignite the gunpowder as a smoke signal. Tsukasa sees this and instantly becomes shook at the thought of Senku making a gun, so he makes a beeline straight to the location. He gets there and takes Yuzuriya as hostage in exchange for the recipe for the revival fluid. Senku, valuing Yuzuriya's life more than the recipe, decides to give the recipe up to Tsukasa. Tsukasa then gives Senku an ultimatum, either to give up science or die. Tsukasa does kill Senku, and Taiju and Yuzuriya use the gunpowder as a diversion to escape. The pair notice a piece of stone still attached to the back of Senku's neck and apply the revival fluid to the piece of stone. We then get a flashback to when Senku first awoke from the stone and began putting things together. The flashback continues and shows us when Senku found Taiju and all the work that it took to revive him. We get back to the present, where the revival fluid has healed Senku's neck injury after changing the petrified part of his skin back to normal. With Tsukasa thinking he's dead, Senku tells Taiju and Yuzuriya to return to Tsukasa as spies, while he goes and searches for new allies. Meanwhile, a mysterious girl named Kohaku approaches Tsukasa and attempts to fight him, but again, Tsukasa's OP, so she fails and gets trapped under a tree Tsukasa chops down in one strike. Senku, hearing the exchange, goes to investigate, finding Kohaku trapped under the tree. Senku then creates a block and tackle to lift the tree off of Kohaku. Kohaku takes Senku back to her village, where we are introduced to the village guards Kinro and Ginro, as well as village sorcerer Chrome. Chrome's sorcery is actually just very early science in this new stone world. Senku is still impressed with how far Chrome came on his own and makes him his apprentice. Senku later learns that Chrome only became a man of science to help Kohaku's sickly sister Ruri. Senku tells Chrome about the world 3,700 years ago and all of its scientific wonders, deciding to make the stone world's first antibiotic. Senku, Chrome, and Kohaku begin their quest to make the antibiotic, and joined by a young villager named Suika. After collecting some iron sand, the group needs more manpower to turn the sand into actual iron. The gang sends Suika to gain intel on what the villagers really want. The answer turns out to be food. Senku creates the stone world's first ever bowl of ramen by using foxtail millet as a noodle substitute to bribe the villagers to help. The gang get approached by a mysterious person by the name of Gen Asagiri, a magician from Senku's time period. Gen tells Senku it was Tsukasa who sent him to confirm Senku's death, but says he will give a false report due to him not being sure of which side to pledge allegiance to completely just yet. A sudden thunderstorm comes through, and with the iron forged from the efforts of bribing the villagers, Senku turns them into magnets. Meanwhile, a violent villager named Magma is set on heading over to Senku's camp to eliminate the quote-unquote sorcerer who's outside the village. Gen uses his magician skills to ward him off, while Senku uses the magnets to build the stone world's first power generator. After convincing Kinro and Jinro to operate it, Senku reinvents the stone world's first light bulb. Gen is attacked by a mystery assailant, just barely surviving due to fake blood bags he had under his clothing. The attacker turns out to be none other than Magma, as he had believed that Gen was the sorcerer and not Senku. Magma's attack was instigated by his desire to win the tournament in the village called the Grand Bout, in which the winner gets to marry Ruri and become village elder. Kohaku had previously beaten him to keep him from marrying her sister and becoming village elder. Gen returns to Tsukasa and gives him a false report on Senku after him and Senku make a deal in which Senku promises to make him some cola. Kohaku, Kinro, and Ginro begin training for the Grand Bout. Senku uses quartz sand to create the stone world's first pair of glasses for Suika, who turns out to be short-sighted, or as the village people call it, fuzzy sickness. Chrome brings in the best craftsman in the village named Kaseki to help glassblow usable lab utensils. Despite never even hearing of the craft before in his life, Kaseki is quickly able to create all the items needed. To break in the new lab, Senku offers to make Ginro a silver spear for a very dangerous upcoming mission. The silver spear is revealed to actually be a sensor for poisonous gas. If it turns black, the air is unsafe. Senku needs to collect some sulfuric acid for the antibiotic. Knowing just how dangerous it will be, Senku offers Chrome to teach him everything that he knows in case he dies. Chrome refuses and is adamant that they work together. To protect against the gases from the pool of sulfuric acid, Senku invents the stone world's first gas mask. Chrome almost falls to his death while collecting the acid, but is saved by Ginro, who was initially too frightened to even join the quest in the first place. Senku and the gang have collected all but one part needed for the antibiotic, and that's alcohol. This makes Senku also join the Grand Bout, as the winner also gets his share of alcohol. Senku arrives in the village and is greeted by Ruri, who is somehow already familiar with Senku and his name. Suika gets kidnapped by Magma's henchman Mantle, and he ties her to a tree. Mantle tells Kohaku that Suika is drowning, which she doesn't believe, but as her conscience eats at her, she runs off to find her anyway. Kinro fights Magma in the first round, holding his own for a bit until he begins to struggle with his vision. Suika had managed to escape her bindings and return to the village just in time to be able to toss her glasses over to Kinro, who begins to beat the bricks off of Magma. Magma manages to use Talk No Jutsu to get Kinro into feeling like he broke the rules and consults the ref about the specifics. As Kinro debates the rule, Magma sneaks up behind him and cracks him in the mata for the W. Mantle then throws his match against Chrome in order to disqualify Kohaku, who did not return in time, as Magma planned. This forces Chrome to fight Magma, and of course he gets his ass whooped. Chrome uses his tears and one of Suika's lenses to create a magnifying lens to set Magma on fire. To help, Gen appears once more and uses his sorcery to force Magma to remain still, otherwise his heart would explode. Magma's pants eventually set ablaze and Chrome wins the match. Ginro gets blinded by desire as he decides not to throw his match against Senku as planned for Chrome to ultimately become the victor, winning the hand of Ruri in marriage. After some running around, Senku hits Ginro in the nuts for the W. Unfortunately, Chrome passes out from his injuries in his fight with Magma before Senku can throw the match, declaring him as the village elder and husband to Ruri. Once Senku gets his alcohol, he immediately divorces Ruri and returns to his lab to finish the antibiotic drug. Ruri's ailment is revealed to actually be pneumonia, and the sulfur drug works as planned. Senku is declared as the new chief of the village, which is revealed to actually be called Ishigami Village. Ruri then explains that she had already knew of Senku's and his name before she even met him. Ruri reveals that she knew of Senku through stories passed down from her mother. The tale speaks of Senku's father, Byakuya, and his journey to becoming an astronaut with the help of his son, Senku. Byakuya travels to the International Space Station 5 years later, joining Shamil Yokov, an American songstress, Lillian Weinberg, and fellow crew members Connie, Dahlia, and Yakov. Byakuya and crew witness the green phenomenon that turns humanity into stone from the space station, leaving them as the only 6 humans left. Byakuya comes to the conclusion that the wave originated in South America. Shamil, Lillian, and Connie go down to Earth to investigate, but end up missing their target and landing in the ocean. Byakuya and the rest of the crew leave the space station to go help their crewmates, and the 6 of them live together on a nearby island, eventually forming bonds and relationships, and eventually raising children together. The crew also come to an illness. However, Byakuya writes down what's called the 100 Tales to pass essential knowledge down to future generations. Ruri takes Senku to Byakuya's gravesite, and Gen Asagiri warns Senku in the village that Tsukasa and his army are on the way. The group from Tsukasa's army arrives led by a man named Hyoga. Kinro is defeated by Hyoga on the bridge to the village, and Ginro is unable to cut down the bridge, with Kinro still on the bridge. Senku, with help from Gen and Magma, provides the ultimate bluff and convinces the opposing force that they have already developed guns, which forces them to retreat. Gen infiltrates the group and convinces them to attack again when it rains. This way the guns would be unusable. When the group attacks again after it rains, Senku had already invented the Stone World's first katanas. Gen previously sabotaged Hyoga's spear, which left him defenseless. Hyoga reveals the attack is just a distraction to allow his ally Homura to sneak into the village and burn it down, forcing everyone out into the open. Suika lures Hyoga's troops away from the village to the poison gases from the sulfur pool, leaving Hyoga and Homura stranded above the poisonous gases. Senku decides communication is key in winning this conflict with Tsukasa and begins plans to invent the Stone World's first cell phone. After the gases have faded away, Hyoga goes back to report to Tsukasa that Senku is still alive. Senku and the villagers get to work on creating the cell phone, aiming for a springtime completion, as that is the time Senku predicts Tsukasa will wage his war. Senku creates the Stone World's first cotton candy machine and gives some cotton candy to Homura, who has stayed behind to spy on the villagers. Senku then develops a gear train for the cotton candy machine, which inspires Chrome to construct a water wheel with Kaseki, which then inspires Senku to create the Stone World's first hydroelectric power plant. Senku, Chrome, and Kaseki begin developing light bulbs, which leads to the Stone World's first Christmas tree. Chrome uses the newly acquired light bulbs to further explore caves where he finds a motherlode of new minerals. Senku and Kaseki attempt to make a vacuum tube, but none of the materials can handle the heat. During the New Year's sunrise, Suika has a rock that glows in the sunrise that turns out to be tungsten, a highly heat-resistant metal. Senku, Chrome, and Magma set out to obtain more. Senku, Chrome, and Magma search a nearby cave for tungsten. Magma seemingly pushes Senku into a sinkhole, but was instead trying to save him from falling in. Regardless, both of them get trapped inside. While trapped together, Senku and Magma come to a mutual understanding and settle their differences, at least until Tsukasa is no longer a threat. Chrome saves them both by filling up the sinkhole with water, and the trio stock up on the minerals they came for and hurry back home just in time for Gen and the villagers to surprise Senku with an observatory for his birthday. With the tungsten acquired, Senku tasks Chrome and Kaseki with creating a method to heat it, using everything they learned since he arrived in the village. They create a tungsten filament, and Senku puts all the parts together to create the very first phone in the new Stone World. After completing the phone, Senku informs the villagers that they have to put in all the effort once more and make another phone for full functionality. After testing the phone via wires, Ruri tells Senku of another story from the 100 Tales that contains a hint which makes Senku find a time capsule sealed in his father's gravestone, a glass record. Senku whips together the Stone World's first record player, in which he and the villagers are able to hear the voices of the astronauts for the first time since petrification, as well as the song from Lillian. Hearing music for the first time inspires the villagers themselves to want to create their own entertainment in their Stone World. Senku declares a stone war against Tsukasa, Taiju and Yuziri lie in wait for Senku's plan to fall through, and Tsukasa and Hyoga prepare for a battle against Ishigami Village. Great, now you're all caught up. Season 2 has already begun and we're already one episode in. If you like this video, please subscribe and follow L.A.N Party for more.